You know, in early 1979, Michael Cimino was on the top of the world. He had just won Best Director and Best Picture for The Deer Hunter, probably one of the most important anti-war films of the era. But within 2 years, he's falsely called Heaven's Gate, although it's been re-regarded as one of the most important American movies in the 1980s. It was a complete disaster from start to finish, not because it was a bad movie, but due to the editing and the overruns and the length were just completely bizarre. So today's podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Heaven's Gate. Of course, not the cult that basically everybody killed himself because he thought aliens were come to bring him forth from the earth, but the real Heaven's Gate. Now, Heaven's Gate, again, came out in 1980, directed by Cimino and starring what a cast it had. Chris Christopherson, Mickey Rourke, Christopher Walken, John Hurt, Sam Waterston, Brad Dourif, Isabelle Huppert, Jeff Bridges, and Joseph Cotton, of all people. Loosely based on the Johnson County War, it revolves around a dispute between two land barons and the European immigrants in Wyoming in the 1890s. Now, again, the follow-up to The Deer Hunter, Heaven's Gate was shot on location in Montana and Idaho, and the production faced numerous setbacks, including, again, cost overruns, significant retakes, bad press, including allegations of animal abuse on set, and rumors about Cimino's allegedly authoritarian directorial style. Cimino had an expensive and ambitious vision for the film, pushing the film nearly 4 times over its planned budget. Now, it would have been better off to release this as a big network miniseries, but at one point I think one of the final cuts was nearly 6 hours. We'll talk about this in a second. Now, after its premiere in November 1980, the film again received significant critical backlash, prompting UA, or United Artists, to pull it from theaters. In April 81, a truncated recut version of the film was released, though it remained a financial failure, earning only about $3.5 million against its $44 million budget. Now, it was subsequently condemned as one of the worst films ever made. According to some historians, such as Peter Biskin, the film's financial failure resulted in the demise of the director-driven film production in the American film industry, steering back towards greater studio control of films. Not like the major studios of the 50s to 70s, but you get our point. Now, in the decade since the release, however, general assessment of Heaven's Gate has become more favorable. The 1980 re-edit has been characterized as one of the greatest injustices of cinematic history, while later re-edits have received critical acclaim. Now, for people wanting to judge on Hollywood Suite in Canada, the full, re-edit of Heaven's Gate is available for view. I've watched Heaven's Gate before. I found it to be a typical, modern Western. Wasn't the most perfect Western, but, but not like the epic they thought it was going to be. Now, the BBC loved it, and it ranked it as 98 on a list of 100 greatest American films of all time. Now, in the plot, 2 young men in 1870, Jim Averill and Billy Irvine, graduate from Harvard College. The Reverend Doctor speaks to the graduates on association of the cultivated mind with the uncultivated and the importance of education. Irvine, brilliant but obviously intoxicated, follows this with his opposing irreverent views. A celebration is then held, after which the male students serenade the women present, including Averill's girlfriend. Now, 20 years later, Averill is passing through the booming town of Casper, Wyoming, on his way north to Johnson County, where he's now a marshal. Poor European immigrants due to the region are in conflict with wealthy established cattle barons organized as the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. As a newcomer sometimes steal their cattle for food. Now, Nate Champion, a friend of Averill and enforcer for the stockmen, kills the settler for suspecting rustling and dissuades another from stealing a cow. At a board meeting, the head of the group, Frank Canton, tells members, including a drunk Irvine, of plans to kill 125 named settlers as thieves and anarchists. Now, Irvine leaves the meeting, encounters Averill, and tells him of the association's plans. As Averill leaves, he exchanges bitter words with Canton. Canton and Averill quarrel, and Canton is knocked to the floor. That night, Canton recruits men to kill the named settlers. Now, Ella Watson, a Johnson County Bordeaux madam from all places, Quebec, long way from home, who accepts stolen cattle as payment for use of her prostitutes, is infatuated about Avril and Champion. Avril and Watson skate in the crowd and dance alone in an enormous roller skating rink called Heaven's Gate, which has been built by local entrepreneur John L. Bridges. Avril receives a copy of the association's debt list from a baseball-playing U.S. Army captain and later reads the names aloud to the settlers, who are thrown into terrified turmoil. Now Cully, a station master and friend of Avril's, sees the train with Canton's posse heading north and rides off to warn the settlers but is murdered en route. Later, a group of men come to Watson's burdeo and rape her. Avril shoots and kills all but one of them. Champion, then realizing that his landowner bosses seek to eliminate Watson, goes to Canton's camp and shoots the remaining rapists, then refuses to participate in the slaughter. Now, Canton and his men encounter one of Champion's friends leaving a cabin with Champion and his friend Nick inside, and a gunfight ensues. Attempting to save Champion, Watson arrives in a wagon and shoots one of the hired guns before escaping on horseback. Nick is killed before Canton's men push a burning cart towards the cabin, setting it on fire. Champion writes a last letter to Ella and emerges from the burning cabin shooting at Canton's men, but is killed by a hail of bullets. Watson warns the settlers of Canton's approach at another huge chaotic gathering ahead of Heaven's Gate, and the agitated settlers decide to counterattack. Bridges leads the attack on Canton's gang, and with the hired invaders now surrounded, both sides suffer casualties, including a drunken poetic Irvine, as Canton leaves to bring help. Watson and Avril return to Champion's charred and smoking cabin and discover his corpse, along with a handwritten letter documenting his last minutes alive. The next day, Avril reluctantly joins the immigrant settlers with their cobbled-together seized machines and explosive charges, an attack against Canton's men and their makeshift fortifications. Again, there are heavy casualties on both sides before the U.S. Army, with Canton in the lead, arrives to stop the fighting and save the remaining besieged mercenaries. Later, at Watson's camp, Bridges, Watson, and Avril prepare to leave for good, but are ambushed by Canton and two others. Avril and Bridges shoot and kill Canton and one of his men, but both Bridges and Watson are killed. A grief-stricken Avril holds Watson's body in his arm. In 1903, about a decade later, a well-dressed, beardless, but older-looking Avril walks a deck off his yacht off Newport, Rhode Island. He goes below when an attractive middle-aged woman is sleeping in a luxurious boudoir. The woman, Avril's old Harvard girlfriend, perhaps now his wife, awakens and asks him for a cigarette. Solidly complies, lights it, and returns to the deck. Now again, big cast here. Chris Christopherson, Christopher Walken, John Hurt, Sam Waterston, Brad Dourif, Isabelle Huppert, Joseph Cotton, Jeff Bridges, Jeffrey Lewis, Paul Coslow, Richard Masser, Ronnie Hawkins, the Hawk, Terry O'Quinn, our guy from Lost, Tom Noonan against Mickey Rourke, Roseanne Villa, Willem Dafoe as Willie, uncredited, and Nicholas Woodson as the Small Man. Now, the basic plot elements of the film are inspired by the Johnson County War, which occurred in 1892, the archetypical cattleman-homesteaders conflict, which also served as a background for Shane and the Virginian. Most of the film's principal characters bear the names of actual key figures in the war, but the events portrayed in Heaven's Gate bear little resemblance to actual historical events. Now, while homesteaders did begin to settle northern Wyoming in the 1890s, claiming land under the newly enacted Homestead Acts, there were no hordes of starving European immigrants killing rich men's cattle to feed their families, as depicted in the film. Now, Nate Champion, who was portrayed as a murderer and forester for the stockmen, was actually a popular small rancher in Johnson's County, nicknamed King of Rustlers by the stockmen, because he resisted their tactic of claiming all unbranded young cattle as their own. Now, Jim Avril was another homesteader who lived about 100 miles southwest of Johnson County. 2 years before the invasion began, he and his common-law wife, Ella, were murdered by the stockmen, who falsely accused Watson of exchanging sexual favors for stolen cattle. There is no evidence that Watson was a Bordeaux madam, as portrayed in the film, nor that Watson or Avril ever knew Nate Champion. Now, in 1972, Cimino submitted the original script for Heaven's Gate, then called the Johnson County War, but the project was shelved when it failed to attract big-name talent. Now, he also did Thunderbolt and Lightfoot next, a big hit in 1974 for Eastwood and Bridges, and 79 on the eve of winning 2 Academy Awards for director and picture for Heaven's The Deer Hunter. He convinced UA to resurrect the Heaven's Gate project, where Kristofferson, Hubert, and Walken as the main characters. He was given an initial budget of $11.6 million, but it was also provided with the bane of producers, carte blanche. Now, principal photography began in April 1679 in Glacier National Park, east of Kalispell, Montana, with the majority of the town scenes filmed in the 2 Medicine area, north of the village of East Glacier Park. Now, shooting also included the town of Wallace, Idaho. The project had a December 14 projected release date and $11.6 million budget, and promptly fell behind schedule. Now, according to the legend, by the 6th day of filming, the project was already 5 days behind schedule. As an example of Cimino's fanatical attention to detail, a street built to his precise specifications had to be torn down and rebuilt because it reportedly didn't look right in his estimation. The street in question needed to be 6 feet wider. The set construction boss said it would be cheaper to tear down one side and move it back 6 feet, but Cimino insisted that both sides be dismantled and moved back 3 feet, then reassembled. An entire tree was cut down, moved in pieces, and relocated to the courtyard where the Harvard 1870 graduation scene was shot. Cimino had an irrigation system built under the land where the major battlefield scene would unfold, so it would remain vividly green to contrast with the red color. Now, Cimino allegedly shot more than 1.3 million feet, 400,000 meters, nearly 220 hours of footage, costing the studio approximately $200,000 per day in salary, locations, and acting fees. Privately, it was joked that Cimino wished to surpass Francis Ford Coppola's mark of shooting 1 million feet of footage for Apocalypse Now, but with Apocalypse Now, there was Redux, the expanded version. Now, Cimino's obsessive behavior soon earned him the nickname the Ayatollah. Production fell behind schedule as rumors spread of Cimino's demanding up to 50 takes of individual scenes and delayed filming until the cloud that he liked rolled into the frame. As a result of the delays, several musicians originally brought to Montana to work on the film for only 3 weeks ended up stranded, waiting to be called for shots and materialize. The experience, as the AP put it, was both stunningly boring and a raucous good time, full of jam sessions, strange adventures, and curiously little actual shooting. The jam session served as the beginning of numerous musical collaborations between Bridges and Kristofferson. Now, as production staggered forward, UA seriously considered firing Cimino and replacing him with another director, the amiable and very talented Canadian Norman Jewison, although in the book Final Cut, author Stephen Bach implies it was David Lean. Now, actor John Hurt reportedly spent so long waiting around in production for something to do that he went off and paid the Elephant Man for David Lynch in the interim, and then came back to shoot more scenes on Heaven's Gate. Now, when they finished shooting in March 1980, having cost nearly $30 million, reportedly during post-production, Cimino changed the lock to the studio's editing room, prohibiting executives from seeing the film until he completed his cut, although Cimino disputed the story. Working with Oscar-winning editor William Reynolds, Cimino worked doggedly over his project. As one person involved in the project noted, Michael didn't want respect, he wanted awe. The idea was that the magic man was in his workshop doing his magic, and we should all just leave him alone and let him finish. Now, on June 26, 1980, Cimino previewed a work print for executives at UA that reportedly ran 5 hours and 25 minutes, 325, which Cimino said was about 50 minutes longer than the final cut would be. The executives flatly refused to release the film in that length, and once again contemplated firing Cimino. However, he promised that he could re-edit the film and spent the entire summer and fall of 1980 doing so, finally paring it down to his original premiere length of 3 hours and 39 minutes, 2:19. The original wide release opening on Christmas 78 and 79 had come and gone, so UA and Cimino finally set up a release date of November 1980. Now, following a brief theatrical release in November 1980, during which the film was poorly received by critics, UA decided to pull the film from theaters, re-releasing it in April 81 in a truncated cut. This is almost 2 years after an initial post-production. Now, despite the efforts to capitalize on the film with a re-release, it was a significant financial failure, earning $3.5 million domestically against its final $44 million budget. Again, the film is considered one of the biggest box office bombs in world history. Now, during an intermission at the film's November 1980 premiere at New York Cinema One Theater, the audience was so subdued that Cimino was said to have asked why no one was drinking the champagne. He was reportedly told by his publicists, because they hate the movie, Michael. The initial critical reception was the film was almost universally negative. The great New York Times critic Vincent Canby panned the film, calling it something quite rare in movies these days, an unqualified disaster, comparing it to a forced 4-hour walking tour of one's own living room. Canby went even further by saying this, it failed so completely that you might suspect Mr. Cimino solely sold to the devil to obtain the success of The Deer Hunter, and the devil has just come around to collect. Now, this review is considered either one of the best or worst in movie history. For me, I think it's just self-masturbation. Yeah, it was too long, but the shorter cut to the movie made a lot of sense, because you're talking about literally a war movie and a western together. Now, after a sparsely attended 1-week run, Cimino UA quickly pulled the film from any further releases, completely postponing a full worldwide release. Now, on April 24th, 81, the film opened in 810 theaters in the director's cut, a 2-hour and 29-minute version that Cimino had recut for a third time. Reviewing the shorter cut in the Chicago Sun-Times, Roger Ebert criticized the film's formal choices and its narrative inconsistencies and incredulities, concluding that the film was the most scandalous cinematic waste I ever have seen. And remember, I've seen Paint Your Wagon. So have I, and I tend to agree. He also called the film one of the ugliest movies that he'd ever seen. Kevin Thomas of the LA Times issued a dissenting opinion when he reviewed the shortened film, becoming one of his few American champions and calling it a true screen epic, while stating that in 2 decades as a critic, he had never felt so totally alone. Now, the film grossed $1.3 million in its opening weekend and closed after the second week with only, again, $3.5 million box office. In '99, Time placed the film on the list of the 100 worst ideas, not movies, ideas of the 20th century. Writing in The Guardian in 2008, Joe Queenan declared Heaven's Gate the worst film made up to that time. This is a movie that destroyed the director's career, he wrote. This is a movie that lost so much money, it literally drove a major American studio out of business. This is a movie about Harvard-educated gunslingers who face off against Eastern European sodbusters in an epic struggle for the soul of America. This is a movie that stars Isabelle Huppert as a shotgun-touting cowgirl. This is a movie which Jeff Bridges pukes while mounted on roller skates. This is a movie that has 5 minutes of uninterrupted fiddle playing by the fiddler who is also mounted on roller skates. This is a movie that defies belief. The Verge said that based on 30 years of critical assessment, Heaven's Gate stands as one of the worst movies ever made. That's not an exaggeration. Now, in subsequent years, some critics have come to the film's defense, beginning with, of course, who would you think? European critics who praised it after films played at Cannes. Robin Will was an early champion of Heaven's Gate in his reassessment, calling it one of the few authentically innovative Hollywood films. It seems to me, in its original version, among the supreme achievements of the Hollywood cinema. David Thompson calls the film a wounded monster and argues that it takes part in a rich American tradition, Melville, James, Ives, Pollock, and Parker, that seeks a mighty dispersal of what has gone before. In America, there are great innovations in art that suddenly create fields of apparent emptiness. They may seem like omissions or mistakes at first, but yet in time we come to see them as meant for our exploration. Martin Scorsese has said that the film has many overlooked virtues. Some of these critics have attempted to impunge the motives of the earliest reviewers. Robin Wood noted in his initial review of the film, reviewers tended to pile on the film, attempting to outdo one another with sarcasm and contempt. Now, several members of the cast and crew have complained that initial reviews of the film were tainted by its production history, and that daily critics were reviewing it as a business story as much as a motion picture. In April 2011, the staff of Time Out London selected Heaven's Gate as the 12 greatest Western of all time. While Peter Biskin covered the many excesses and problems with the movie in his book Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, he also noted that Heaven's Gate was not dissimilar to other big-budget travel projects of the late 70s and early 80s, such as Steven Spielberg's 1941 and Warren Beatty's Reds, and that the backlash against Heaven's Gate could have easily been directed elsewhere. Biskin speculated that Michael Cimino's personal unpopularity was the main reason this film became so widely reviled. Philip French praised the film in his original review. Now, you could get away with stuff like this if you're Kubrick or Robert Altman, but you couldn't get away Cimino because Altman and Kubrick and a few others could do like different things like that, but Cimino had no credibility. And Thunderbolt and Lightfield's a good movie, but you weren't doing 60 takes of Jeff Bridges being a crossdresser. That's all I can say. Now, in the fall of 2012, the film was released to soak up acclaim as a 216-minute director's cut at the '69 Venice Film Festival. On August 30th, in the presence of Cimino, following 1 month later by screening at the New York Film Festival in the Masterwork lineup, along with Laurence Olivier's underrated Richard III and Frank Oz's director's cut of Little Shop of Horrors. It was then shown at the Festival Lumière in France, where Venice Festival director Alberto Barbera described the film as an absolute masterpiece that had disappeared, and whose 1980 cutting was characterized as a massacre by nervous producers that had been one of the greatest injustices of cinematic history that had destroyed careers. Cimino and Kristofferson were bombarded at the time with annihilating critical reviews. Now, in March 2013, the new director's cut was again featured in New York City in a week-long screening at the Film Forum. A major article by New York Times critic Manola Dargis opined that the film's Second Coming brightens a murky, legendary work of art in a restoration that also reveals the contradictions of a great flop. Now, an article by Nicholas Barber on the BBC website in December 2015 traced the history of the critical reception of Heaven's Gate and concludes, so much of Heaven's Gate is patently splendid that it's mind-boggling that anyone could pronounce it as an unqualified disaster. And the scenes which were slammed in the 1980s being symptomatic of waste and excess, the Harvard Waltz, the mass roller skating, are the scenes which take your breath away. Reflecting on the depicted negative attitudes of immigrants, he writes, however unwelcome Heaven's Gate may have been in 1980, this has been a more urgently topical film in 2015. Now, the film itself holds a 59 score on Rotten Tomatoes based on 46 reviews with an average rating of 6.7. The website's critical consensus reads, Heaven's Gate contains too many ideas and striking spectacle to be a disaster, but this Western buckles under the weight of its own sprawl. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 57 out of 100, based on 15 critics, indicating indie average or mixed reviews. Now, its cost and poor performance at the box office generated more negative publicity than actual financial damage, causing Transamerica Corporation, UA's corporate owner, to become anxious over its own public image and to abandon film production altogether. In 1981, Transamerica sold United Artists to Kerkorian, who also owned MGM, which effectively ended the studio's existence as an independent studio. The company has since been a subsidiary of MGM. While the money lost due to Heaven's Gate was considerable, UA was still a thriving studio with a steady income provided by the James Bond, the Pink Panther, and Rocky franchises. On the other hand, UA was already struggling after the executive walkout in '78 and several other major box office flops in 1980, including Cruising, Foxes, and Roadie. Bummers all. The fracas had a wider effect on the American Western film industry. During the 1970s, relatively young directors such as Coppola, Scorsese, Bogdanovich, Lucas, Friedkin, and Spielberg had been given large budgets with very little studio control. However, the director's power lessened considerably as a result of disappointing box office performers such as Friedkin's Sorcerer in '77 and Cruising, and culminating in Coppola's Run from Your Heart and Cimino's Heaven's Gate. The studios evolved away from the director-driven film and eventually led to new paradigm of the high-concept feature, optimized by Star Wars and Jaws, both of which came before Heaven's Gate. As the new high concept of filmmaking became more entrenched, studio concept and control of budgets and productions became tighter, ending the free-wheeling excesses that had begotten Heaven's Gate. Now, with the animal cruelty, the accusations were brought up by the AHA, the American Humane Association, which was barred from monitoring the animals on set. They had issued press releases detailing the abuses and organized boycott picket lines. The outcry prompted the Screen Actors Guild and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers to contractually authorize the AHA to monitor the use of all animals in all film media afterwards. Now, one assertion was that steer were bled from the neck while giving them painkillers, so that the blood could be collected and smeared upon the actors in a scene. The AHA asserted that 4 horses were killed and many more injured during a battle scene. It was claimed that one of the horses was blown up with dynamite. This footage is claimed to have been included in the final film. Now, according to the AHA, the owner of an abused horse filed a lawsuit against the producers, director, Patterson Productions, and the horse wrangler. The owner cited wrongful injury and breached a contract for willfully depriving her Arabian gelding of proper care. The suit cited the severe physical and behavioral trauma and disfigurement of the horse. The case was settled out of court. Now, there was accusations of actual cockfights, decapitated chickens, and a group of cows disemboweled to provide fake intestines for the actors. Now, the film is listed on AHA's list of unacceptable films. The AHA protested the film by distributing an international press release detailing the assertions of animal cruelty and asking people to boycott it. AHA eventually organized picket lines outside movie theaters in Hollywood, while local humane societies did the same across the states. Though Heaven's Gate was not the last film to have animals killed during its production, it is believed that the film was largely responsible for sparking the now common use of "no animals were harmed" in the making of this film, and more rigorous supervision of animal acts by the AHA, which have been inspecting film production since the 1940s. Now, the UK Blu-ray release from Second Sight Films removes about a minute of footage relating to the cockfights and animal cruelty. Prior video releases removed about a minute and 14 seconds of the cruelty. Now, different versions of the film. The work print cut was 325 minutes, came out in early 1980. The premiere release, 219 minutes. The cinema release was aborted after 1 week. It was shown on the Z Channel Cable Network, 1982 as director's cut, then released on VHS and Laserdisc by MGM as a legendary uncut version, which was later released on DVD in 2000. The director's second edit, 149 minutes, got a wide cinema release in April 81 and released on DVD in France and the Netherlands. The radical cut, 219 minutes, was a 2005 special screening in Paris and New York, and was reassembled by MGM with available high-quality footage using alternative footage where required. Now, the digitally restored director's cut is 216 minutes, and was restored in 2012 for the 69 Venice Film Festival, which was followed by a BD and DVD release, and based on initial release with intermission removed, it was slightly shortened. Now, notwithstanding the 325-minute work print cut showing the executives of June 80, Cimino had rushed through post-production editing in order to meet his contractual requirements of UA and to qualify for the 1980 Academy Awards. The version screened at the November 80 premiere ran 3 hours and 39 minutes. Bridge joked that Cimino had worked on the film so close to the premiere that the print screened was still wet from the lab. Now, after the aborted 1-week premiere run in New York, Cimino UA pulled the film. Cimino wrote an open letter to the studio that was printed in several trade papers, blaming unrealistic deadline pressures for the film's failure. UA reportedly also hired his own editor to try to edit Cimino's footage in a releasable film, but with no real success. Now, ultimately, Cimino's second edited version, 149-minute length, premiered in April 81 and was only cut of the film screened in a wide release. The original negative for the longer version no longer exists because it was directly edited on for the 149-minute version. for the YCM separation masters of the longer version were used as the source for the Criterion Collection release. Now, this cut of the film is not just shorter, but differs radically in placement of scenes and selection of takes. This version, after leaving theaters, was not released on home video of any kind in the U.S., but was later released on DVD in France, Le Porte de Paradis, which is the door to heaven, or Heaven's Gate. The version is also aired on the MGM HD cable channel, and it was available free with ads on U.S. streaming provider Tubi from March to November 2017. Now, in '82, Z Channel aired the 219-minute 80 premiere version of film on cable, the first time that the longer version was widely exhibited, in which Z Channel dubbed the director's cut. As critic FX Feeney noted in the documentary Z Channel, A Magnificent Accession, Z Channel's broadcast of Heaven's Gate first popularized the concept of the director's cut. Now, when MGM, which acquired the rights to UA's catalog after his demise, released the film on VHS and Videodisc in the 1980s, it released Cimino's 219-minute cut with the tagline Heaven's Gate, the legendary uncut version. Subsequent releases on Laserdisc and DVD have contained only the 219-minute cut. Now, due to the wide availability of the 2019-minute 80 premiere version of Heaven's Gate and its frequently labeling as either uncut or director's cut, Cimino insisted that the so-called original version did not fully correspond to his intentions and that he was under pressure to bring it out for a predetermined date and did not consider the film ready, making even the 219-minute version essentially an unfinished film. The 260-minute version, sold in Venice, is quite similar to the 219-minute version, but with no intermission. Some shots in the second part are slightly shorter, and a shot with a single line has been cut, just after John Hurt is beaten by Sam Waterston. Now, in the 149-minute version of Heaven's Gate, released in '81, the following scenes were cut: Irvine's speech at the Harvard grad, the co-ed circle dancing immediately following graduation, Avril beating up the brutal enforcer, Avril passing the beaten man's window in a carriage, asking her how she's doing, the spitting fight between the two immigrant landowners and the cockfight scene, the entire roller skating dance scene, a shot of female immigrants carrying a load up the hill, Champion almost shooting the stock roar that insults Ella Watson, the scene where Ella Watson first leaves Champion to return to Avril, the introductory part of the scene where Avril reads the names on the death list. The edited version starts with John Bridges firing the gun in the air to restore order. Avril weeping to Bridges that he hates getting old while looking at the old photo of himself and his girlfriend. The immigrants being informed that Avril quit his post, and Watson warning them that the stock roars have arrived. The last 5 or so minutes of the second battle scene include the footage of the character crushed under the wagon and the woman killing him in mercy. That same woman killing herself after a battle, and Bridges and Avril surveying the carnage. Any reference to the woman on the boat, presumably Avril's girlfriend or wife, from the end of the film. Now, in 2005, MGM released the film in selected cinemas in the States and Europe. This 219-minute cut was reassembled by MGM archives of John Kirk, who reported that large portions of the original negative have been discarded, making this an all-new radical version using whatever alternate available scenes that could be found. The restored print was screened in Paris and presented to a sold-out audience at New York's Museum of Modern Art with a live introduction by Isabelle Huppert. Because the project was commissioned by then MGM executive Bingham Ray, who was ousted shortly thereafter, the budget for the project was cut, and a planned wider release in DVD never materialized, and probably never will. Now, in 2012, MGM released yet another version, digitally restored and 216 minutes long. It premiered at the 2012 Venice Film Festival as part of the Venice Classics series. Now, the Criterion Collection released the restored 260-minute version on Blu-ray disc and DVD on November 20, 2012. This director's cut was personally supervised by Cimino and Joanne Canelli. Cimino explains in the special features portion of DVD that it is his preferred version of the film, and he feels it is the complete version he intended to make. Now, accolades and negativity. Academy Awards, well-deserved a nomination for Best Art Direction, Set Direction. Cannes Film Festival, he was nominated for the Palme d'Or, Cimino, but at the Golden Raspberries, Worst Picture, Joanne Corelli. Worst Director, Cimino. Worst Actor, Chris Christopherson. Worst Screenplay, Michael Cimino. Worst Musical Score, David Mansfield. All nominated, didn't win. Stinker's Bad Movie Awards, Worst Picture. It won Cimino Worst Director, and it was nominated for Worst Screenplay, and Most Intrusive Musical Score, David Mansfield. Now, the list of box office bombs is very heavy through the years, but I think basically it was a movie of its time. But see, 1980 to about 89, you're getting more and more what they call the big westerns and the long riders and stuff like that. So I mean, 601 half dozen the other. I'll be going back to this movie very soon because I'm going to have an opportunity to finally watch the full version on Honeymoon Suite. I did have a chance to see this at the movie theater, but it was pulled so quickly. As soon as the posters went up, the posters came down at my local theater. The new movies will come in on a Friday. Heaven's Gate came in on a Friday. Nobody showed up, and the poster was taken down on Monday. There was a new film on the Tuesday. And all I can say, ladies and gentlemen, if Cimino didn't sell his soul to make Deer Hunter, I don't know. I don't know what to think. With all the great cast he had in this movie, and to come up with something that was less than stellar, it's still mind-boggling. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our latest screenshots movie column. If you like what we're doing here, talking about vintage movies, give us a like, comment, subscribe. And I'm sorry this podcast is only 35 minutes, but I didn't want to do the whole Heaven's Gate, 5 or 6 hours. Anyway, a lot of stuff to cover. Thanks for listening. Bye.